Some of my friends knew from day one that they wanted to be a doctor. They directed all their time and energy into the subjects that mattered. Decision making was relatively easy because they loved science and they didn't really care for drama or textiles. They were always excited for the day that GCSE or A-level choices came because they could finally narrow down the subjects that they wanted to study. They were even more excited to finally get to university and study what they wanted to. Not me. I always dreaded cutting down subjects. Choosing for GCSE? Horrible. Choosing just 3 or 4 subjects for A-level? Miserable. I have and always will be a bit of an all-rounder. I just always loved everything and I didn't want to specialise. Especially in the UK, we're raised into a system which really values specialisation, which I understand. It seems like the key to getting a good job and achieving mastery in one area. And I always just found this so hard because in the UK, you literally choose your life path at like 16. Which is partly why I now go to university under the US system where I can have a major and a minor and study electives and different things. So I always grew up thinking specialism, good. Generalism, very bad. But I recently read this book called Range. And this book argues that being a generalist is a very, very good thing in the modern world for different problems, different types of jobs. And it honestly made me feel better about the chaotic mess that I am in my academic practices and what I want to do with my life. If you feel like you are an all-rounder, if you feel like you love many subjects, if you have pivoted career path or feel that you might have various pivots throughout your life, then I really think you might find this book interesting. Welcome to a little book review. One thing I am a specialist in, tea. Okay, so what is Range? Range is a book by David Epstein, which has the overall thesis that generalism is favourable in a lot of different circumstances, and that it's even better than specialism in many domains. He argues this by taking many different examples from cognitive studies, from sports, from business, from military, which I feel like is quite a trend in self-help books to like dive into military examples. Similar to what I did with my Defining Decade book review, I've sort of honed in on 3 main points that I'm going to talk about with key takeaways and then end with some little critiques because we always need to have a critique in the self-help world. The first main point I found interesting was breadth first, specialise later. There are so many interesting examples of people who have been involved in such a different range of careers, of study specialisms, until they eventually found the thing that they ended up doing, but they ended up being better at that eventual specialty than the people who specialise early. For example, the best researchers with the most hit papers, the biggest breakthroughs, are people who have generally had really meandering careers. So maybe their hit paper was in physics, but they spent their entire scientific career within different areas of the natural sciences, within biology. Maybe they're a psychologist at first or a doctor first. And it was this huge breadth within the many areas of science that gave them the advantage when they eventually specialised. Nobel laureates in science are 22 times more likely than their other counterparts who don't have Nobel Prizes to have artistic pursuits outside of their field. In my first year of university, I went to a networking event and I met this wonderful man who is super high up at the consulting firm Bain. He's like, I can't remember, he's like head of strategy or something very cool and very important. And I sat down and I had an informational interview with him. Basically asked him, how did you get to this crazy high up position? What was your career path like? And in my head, I think I had this bias that he'd been in this industry for like 30 or 40 years, that he had climbed up the ladder slowly, gotten to understand everything about consulting, made connections in the field, and then eventually been awarded with the position that he was in. But no. This man had worked so many random jobs in random fields, and then he also became a doctor, like did 6 years of study, worked as a doctor for like 10 years, and it was only when he was about 50 that he pivoted and decided to go into business and to specialise specifically within consulting. He had all these transferable skills from different jobs which weren't the same as consulting, but which led him to really succeed in that field. One interesting study in Range showed that people who specialise early in their career will make more money at first. However, late specialisers who initially prioritise breadth in their career eventually find work which is better suited to their skills, their personalities, and they generally have a huge spike in earnings towards the middle and end of their careers. It's like they spent their life investing time in so many different things so that eventually this wealth of experience could really help them when they did eventually choose a specialty. In my degree, my major is cognitive science, so everything about the brain, neuroscience, psychology, that vibe, but more like whole brain level. school. And 2 semesters ago, I actually did an elective in philosophy. And I found that even though it was such a different domain, and even though it wasn't tailored to be applicable to cognitive science, I learned so much which gave me tools to analyze the brain in a new way. And I was like, oh my god, wow, like this is the power of breadth in your studies and in your interests, is that you can bring all these new lenses and create new insights. Number 2 is trenches of knowledge. Epstein uses so many examples to show that when you deeply specialize, you can become less creative in the field that you're in. Okay, imagine the ground. And as you dig into one domain, you're sort of getting deeper into this trench. You're getting all your knowledge, but you're like diving down into the ground. And it's just harder to get perspective on the overall ground and the trees and everything else going on in the world up here because you're so deep down in this trench. For example, you're a firefighter who has specialized in one type of fire structure in one specific type of context, and you're so good at it, you know exactly what needs to be done in that scenario. But then one day you're faced with a totally different scenario, a totally different fire structure, a totally different everything, and you've spent 10, 20 years exactly in the specialism, that rather than thinking newly, creatively, analysing it with a new lens, you're leading with what you know, you're leading with your specialty because it's easy and it becomes your comfort zone. And then you don't actually come up with a good solution. Oh, this was such an interesting study. Students were split into 2 groups and they were all asked to solve a puzzle. They didn't know that the puzzle could actually be solved in 70 ways. One group got a reward every time they solved the puzzle. The other group did not get a reward when they solved the puzzle. What happened was, this group who got rewarded just kept on doing the same one solution again and again and again to receive the reward, whereas the group that weren't rewarded actually ended up finding all 70 solutions because they just kept trying. They were more creative because they weren't being rewarded for this one narrow specialty that they'd found. And I think this is a good metaphor for trenches of knowledge. If you're absolutely rewarded for one way of doing something, for one very, very narrow specialty way of thinking within a domain, you stop looking for new ways to do things, you stop trying to reinvent the wheel, you stop trying to be creative. The book really hammers home that the more life experiences you have, the more domains that you are involved in, the more that you can find links between them, and the more analogies that you can use to create new solutions to problems. If you're a scientist and an artist, maybe you can use artistic analogies to view a scientific problem in a brand new way that no scientist has ever considered before, and come up with a hypothesis that the world needs. And finally, number 3, the type of problem. To me, this is the most compelling part of the book and the most similar to what I know from my problem-solving unit of cognitive science and how humans solve problems. In the world, we have 2 types of problems. One is well-defined and one is ill-defined. In the book, they call this a kind world and a wicked world. In a kind world, in a well-defined problem, you know the initial state of where you are, you know the goal state of where you want to get to, and all the constraints, all the obstacles in between are also very well defined. A wonderful example of this is chess. In chess, you know the initial state of the board, you know your goal state of checkmate, and then everywhere in between the initial state and the goal state is defined by how all the pieces can move. Yes, there's creativity involved, but you can also learn things, you can learn patterns, you can learn chunking. And it's in these well-defined problems that practice, that specialism, that hard work, that constantly going over the same problem again and again and again will make you better. Specialists are 1,000 times better than generalists in well-defined domains. Most sports are similar, like the more you are doing deep work in that one type of sport, the better you're gonna be. But the world also has wicked worlds, the ill-defined problems where sometimes you don't even know the initial state, you don't actually know the goal state, you don't really know how to get there aren't smooth operations in between. And it is these kind of problems where generalists do better, because the whole way that you're defining the endpoint is based off of your own creativity, your own experience, your own use of analogies from different problems you've encountered. And so the more domains you've been involved in, the more lenses you have on the world, the better the solutions will probably be. And as the world evolves, those well-defined problems are going to be continually solved by AI and technology. Because if you can define the goal state, if you can define the operators to get there, you can code something. You can create an algorithm that will get you there better than any human can. But the jobs which are never going to be taken by technology are those which are inherently human, in making links between different domains, in being truly creative. And the book argues that that is where being a generalist is necessary. And why do I think this book is so important? If you're a student and you don't know what to study, this is hope. This is your essential reminder that it is good to not know exactly the career path that you want to have. It is good to dabble in multiple fields, to have experience working multiple jobs, to study different things, to pivot your studies, to have depth in different things, so that you can be this generalist who has multiple lenses to approach problems with. I think it's just so refreshing to hear something against the whole 10,000 hours specialism mindset as well. It's more reflective of the modern world and the new creative jobs coming about. The biggest takeaway for me is that different types of environments and different challenges require new creativity. The more experience you have in other fields, the more likely you are to draw upon new analogies to solve them in a creative way. However, there are always critiques. Firstly, I'm not gonna lie, this book is long. It is unnecessarily long. There are so many examples. Do we need that many examples? No, we do not. Too many examples, not enough novel points. Genuinely, you can read the first few chapters and understand the thesis quite well. Confirmation bias. I think the book is written assuming that you already agree that being a generalist is a pretty good thing. If you passionately believe that specialism is better in the world, I don't think this book does the best job at changing your mind. Like, there's a lot of unanswered questions. One of which is, are they mutually exclusive? This is something I found confusing in the book, is where does specialism start? He's basically arguing, oh yeah, generalism is so much better, but then he's saying generalism is better so that you can then specialise better? Like, yeah, apply all your breadth and all your generalism to eventually be in a specialist field. That was the vibe I got. So it's almost like be a generalist first to be a better specialist. I also would have loved to have seen him engage with the 10,000 hours specialism critique more deeply, because Malcolm Gladwell has massively popularised that theory. There's also a lot of evidence there. Like, it would have been cool to see him take evidence from that book or studies that show the opposite of what he's getting at and try and shoot them down in a meaningful way. And finally, the type of examples used. I think this is just very self-help book vibe. I don't know, like, show me some activists. Give me some more diverse examples, because in my head, wow, being an activist is the definition of being a generalist. Like, an understanding of politics, social dynamics, economics, journalism, maybe other areas too. Like, generalists are novel thinkers in so many spaces, and I think this centered too much on sports and military. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you got to this point, please tell me your experience of being a generalist, of being a specialist, of being an indecisive person in life, and how that's maybe served you well. We're all on this journey of figuring ourselves out and our places in the world and the existing systems and finding a career and all of it. So sharing your experience will undoubtedly help someone else. If you made it to this point, comment a key and I will reply to your comment and give you some love. I have some time this summer, so let me know what book you want me to read and do a book review of. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye guys.